Hello, this is Audrey Jabbar and I'm doing my final project. My final project is titled Not Guilty by Reasoning of Insanity. Let's get started. I will be defining and describing forensic psychology assessments. I will go over the history and the developing of assessment tools, the acts made by court rulings, and lastly I will go over the MacArthur Competency Assessment Tools, as that is the tool that I will be focusing on. Forensic psychological assessment is a theory used in legal setting of psychological evaluations. Sorry if you can hear that, my charger is being funky today. The assessment tools are used to comprehend the defendant's frame of mind when the crime was committed. The assessments can be given by psychologists, psychiatrists, neurologists, neuropsychologists, other healthcare professionals, and they are called on by judges in the court, lawyers, law enforcement offices, and they are to give their professional opinion about the person's mental status. The assessment will determine one of three things normally. The competency enough to stand trial, which means they understand what is happening. Are they criminally responsible, meaning they understand right from wrong at the time of the crime? Are they ready for parole, which means that they have benefited from their sentence and ready to rejoin society? The history of forensic psychological assessments. As early as the 16th century, it used to be argued in court that the mental status of the defendant should be considered before finding them guilty for a crime that was committed. But in 1843, it marked a historical day in the courts, as Daniel Knott was the first to be found not guilty by reason of insanity, even though his crime was that he tried to assassinate the British Prime Minister. Following this breakthrough, of course, other assessments have been developed. These assessments, many over time, you have the competency screening test. This contains 22 complete the sentence questions. They are scaled from 0 to 2, meaning that 0 is that they do not understand the statement or the action that is being stated, and 2 means that they have complete understanding of what's being stated. 1 means that they maybe understand part of it, not all of it. The sentences basically fill in the sentence. So you might have a sentence of, the jury is here too, and the person can say, decide if I'm guilty or not, which means they would get a 2 because they understand why the jury is there. Or the jury is here to hang me, which means that they would score a 0 because they don't understand why the jury is there and what their abilities are and not. Another assessment is the fitness interview test. This is an ideographic measure. Then you have the MacArthur Competency Assessment Tool. There's 2, but the one that we will be looking at is the criminal adjunction. And then the evaluation of competency to stand trial. This is a revised assessment. Both these are used to compare scores of the defendants for competency against other test takers. So as a more general view. The Knott standard was based on his case, and it basically tries to assess the knowledge of right or wrong. This assessment is actually still used in England, and it's used in few courtrooms still in America, but it's not very popular anymore. You have the Rogers Criminal Responsibility Assessment Scale. It's used to determine that the American Law Institute standards are being met, which we will talk about in a minute. And then the psychopathy checklist. It was created in 1980 by Robert D. Hare. It's a 22 checklist showing one's personality characteristics and comparing them to their history. This checklist was actually used in a maximum security psychiatric ward and correctly identified 80% of the violent criminals inside the ward. And now we're going to go over and discuss the rulings that were made by the Supreme Court. The most famous in forensic psychology is the Dusky versus United States, and it is when the Supreme Court stated that there are 3 factors to determine someone's competency level. One is their ability to consult with counsel. Another is their factual understanding of proceeding, and the third is their rational understanding of proceedings. They have to have all 3 to be able to go to court and prove that they understand what is going on. We also have the Durham Standard, which was based on the case Durham versus the United States. This case states that this act states that the person cannot be held accountable for an unlawful act as a result of a mental disorder or a mental disease. Then we have the American Law Institute Standard. This is still used today. It is widely used all over the United States, and it states that an individual cannot be held responsible for a criminal act if said person is medically labeled insane at the time of the act from a mental disorder, meaning that they cannot understand the wrongdoing or conform their actions to the law of the land. It is very important that it is understood that they have to be medically insane at the time of the act, not after. And this has to be from a mental disorder. And it has to prove that they cannot follow the laws, and they do not know right from wrong. They do not understand what's happening. And now we're going to move on to the MacArthur's Competency Assessment Tool. This is the one that is most used as an assessment in the judicial system to date. It is the most reliable. It is a 22 item assessment that was developed by MacArthur Foundation. It is a revision of the original MacArthur structured assessment. There are more recent since the MacArthur, many. I listed some, but the MacArthur was still the one that is the most reliable assessment that is used most often. It is a portable adult administered assessment, and it is administered by a mental health professional, meaning that the mental health professional, whether it be a psychologist, psychiatric professional, neurologist, whoever comes, they bring the assessment with them, and they administer it to the defendant. It is prone towards older adult crowd. And the assessment is given when called on by the judge or lawyer or officer or whoever needs to call for the professional to come in. It is approximately 35 to 45 minutes long. The items are split into 3 abilities: understanding, reasoning, and appreciation. In the understanding section, there are 8 questions, and these want to test the person's ability to understand what is going on inside the courtroom. The next section, also 8 questions, is the reasoning, and that assesses the person's knowledge of relevant and irrelevant information, and their understanding of plea bargaining. The last 6 items are the appreciation section, and this is actually about personalized to the defendant's own case and shows that they understand themselves as the defendant. The psychometrics of the MacArthur is in the study conducted to test the psychometrics. It reported that the results give good reliability. This is actually in other studies I found the same results. They have a good reliability. As you can see here, there's a good internal consistency. Reasoning is 0.81, understanding is 0.85, and the appreciation is 0.88 for this study. The inter-rater reliability is very strong. It's almost excellent. As you can see, its appreciation is 0.75, reasoning is 0.85, and understanding is 0.90. In another study that also tested the reliability and validity, the reliability again was very strong, but the validity was not as strong. But when reviewing and assessing the scores, there are 2 ways that they do it. The scores are put into 2 factors, which means that they combine the first 2 areas, the understanding and reasoning together, and score them together, and then they do the appreciation by itself. Because the 2 are general and the appreciation is more personal. But when they do them all 3 separate and score them separately, each on their own, there is a stronger validity shown. The limitations. There aren't so many limitations, but there are 2 main ones that I found. In competency to stand trial assessments, there is a worry about the likely to fall victim to having somebody fake a mental disorder. The MacArthur was found to be very vulnerable to this because it lacks proper screening, and this could be due to the limitations of the response style, as you answer them as like a multiple choice. There's also an issue with the appropriate age or age bias in it. You will see that there was a study done, and that's on the next slide, but it is to show that there are 8 of the items are age measure bias questions. Depending on if the MacArthur is used in a research or clinical study, that will determine if that is a high percentage to have 8 out of the 22 as a measured bias working with adolescents. But in the study that I told you, they took criminal groups, 3 groups. You have the direct file group. It's age 16 to 17 at the time of the crime. They were tried in court and detained in jail. All of these were from Florida, and they're all male. Then they have 2 comparison groups, age 16 to 17 at the time of the crime in one group, but they were tried in juvie and detained in juvenile detention center. And then the third group is 18 to 24 at the time of the crime, but tried in court and detained in jail. The results found that the direct file group scored slightly higher than the other 3, but this study did show that they studied other studies and found that there wasn't a difference between the scores when using the MacArthur. It is possible that the higher score for the direct group was because of this particular sample, or the fact that the comparison groups were a mix of 3 states, while the direct group were all Floridian criminals. And so that is my project report. I hope that you enjoyed this. My time for the recording is about to run out. I have all my references following, and I want to thank you for an amazing 8 weeks, and I loved doing this project and all the things that I have learned in your class.